Right. Alicia Molik, what was your best singles ranking?
My best singles ranking ever was in '05. I was ranked number 8 in the world, only for a period of about 4 or 5 months.
And that was right before you had the inner ear
Correct.
problem. And
Leading up until my highest ranking, when I was number 8 in the world, it was the most successful period of time in a 6-month period that I'd ever had in my entire career. So I played a huge volume of matches. I played a huge volume of tournaments, probably too many in hindsight. My fear was if I didn't play enough, then I would lose my momentum, I would lose my touch, lose my feel. So for me at the time, it was the more the better, and I think I did myself harm by not having a bit of a break, not having a rest, not resting and recouping.
That's very interesting. Important for us, Patrick, who I coach, is coming back from an injury. It's always very tough getting back on the court after a long break. How long were you off in total before your next tournament?
I was off in total, I had a 3 or 4 month break. I tried to come back and it was hugely unsuccessful. I was still struggling with my middle ear problem. And then it was more than a year, almost 2 years. Of laying low. I wasn't able to play, compete. I was having problems with my vision, my middle ear, my perception, my balance. So really I needed to see a vestibular physiotherapist. I basically almost had to go to an old people's home, really, and I was doing exercises next to grandmas and grandpas aged in their 70s, 80s. So for me, mentally, that was really tough because I felt like I was starting from scratch again. I had some really low times. I was really flat and really frustrated. Sometimes looking back, I think, wow, maybe I was a little bit depressed too, not being able to play tennis every day like I could normally, and I was fearful of the fact that I'd never be able to play again, of contemplating my future without tennis. But the difficult part also was once that 2-year period had finished, was then having the courage and trying to get the fitness back that I had previously, which was very difficult to get back. And the hardest thing for me was expectation of other people. I found that really difficult to deal with, is that everyone remembered me at a certain level, and I found the most difficult thing was playing at a lower ranking, playing at a lower level, and having to accept that for a period of time. That's what I struggled with mentally. I never felt like I was achieving for a long period of time unless I got back up to a higher ranking. Obviously I never got there in the end. I never got back to number 8. But I really struggled mentally being at a lower ranking until time passed and I realised that still being ranked 100 or still being at a certain level was okay. It took time to rebuild.
And I'm guessing that gave you a different perspective on the sport, like having the time away. I know you're saying when you came back, it's tough to drop back in levels, and there's a lot of different conditions there, a lot of different pressures. You're playing players that everyone, like you say, everyone expects you to beat, but there's different conditions. Maybe not as many umpires on the court. You get bad calls. It's windy. The courts are not the same week in, week out. Where on the WA tour, things are very similar. You've got your play lounge, you've got your food around, and
that was the hardest part. Is coming from Grand Slams, the US Open, the Australian Open, playing in Zurich, all these events where the top players are, and you have amazing facilities. You get fresh balls all the time. The gyms are there, great hotels. To start my comeback, I was ranked 0. I wasn't even on the rankings charts because I never protected my ranking. So it fell by the wayside. So I had to start as a nobody, as a no one, when I'd previously been a top 10 player. That was really hard. And going back to Port Pirie, I remember going back to Mount Gambier, I played in Esperance, I played in Bendigo, going back to all these events where I had to call my own lines, I had to pick up my own balls. The healthiest thing in the canteens were, toasted ham and cheese sandwiches. The hardest thing also was having a lot of players around me, which maybe weren't necessarily as professional as the players with high rankings at the Pro Tour, at the professional WTA and ATP events where, after matches, a lot of top players go off and they stretch and they cool down and chat with their coaches and get back out on the practice court and work on things. Sometimes on the lower level, it's hard to rise. It takes a lot of, I think, concentration and a lot of guts to rise above that. When there is a certain level, everyone seems to be doing the same thing. It takes a special character to work above that and realise that you need to practice a bit more, you need to be more professional. So that was hard for me too, is playing at a lower level and rising above it and trying to do the right thing, keeping in mind that I wanted to be at this level, not just be happy with a lower ranking.
We're about to embark on that very similar tour. We're starting in Alice Springs, and then we're going to head to Port Pirie. We've got Esperance and Bendigo in there. Pat's been out probably 4 months now. He tried a comeback which didn't work. And is there any advice you'd have for him? Any tricks mentally to fool yourself? The confidence. Maybe 5-4 serving for a match. You get down 30-40. He doesn't have much to draw on at the moment. Hasn't had a great year. And now the injury. Were there any special tricks you did during your first matches back on tour?
Yeah, well, for me, I was incredibly nervous when I'd been off tour so long, and you have people watching you and expecting a certain level. Well, first of all, I'm a big believer that you create your own luck, so there's no point trying to rely on getting a good draw. There's no point trying to rely on your opponent playing bad, or you having being blessed with the perfect weather conditions to suit your game style. But I think you create your own luck, and what I mean by that is, if you spend the extra time practicing on the things you need to work on, it's not just about you, but every other competitor in the draw will see you out on the practice court. They'll see that you're working hard. So even if you're not confident about something, all your competitors and the people you'll be playing against see you out there, or they might see you out there doing an extra stretching session or warming up professionally. They see all of that and they'll all automatically think, wow, this guy's serious, that girl's serious, she's professional, I'm going to have a tough time against her or him on the match court. That's what I always remembered. And I remember going through some really tough sessions, running sessions and gym sessions, and what I'd remind myself when I either didn't feel like doing them or I found them really tough going is I'd think, right, if I get through this, the next select chord I get, I'm going to win. Or the next tie break I play, I'm going to scrape through and get. Yeah. I almost in my head created a reward system. And I think you do create your own luck, because if you go that extra mile, I think things start to work in your favour. But it is difficult conditions on the Pro Tour events that Pat's about to play. Port Pirie, it's not a nice place. It's windy, it's dusty, it's hot. There's not a lot to do there. The local pool is a great place to go and cool off if it happens to be hot and you are a bit bored. But finding the mindset to be really motivated and excited to play in those conditions and in cities like that or towns like that is very difficult. So it's just a little bit of a warning, but a little bit of something, some information to know what to expect. There are some nicer places to play, but you have to just, I guess, take all the conditions.
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm trying to say is be in control of what you can control. Yeah. And some days aren't going to be perfect. The weather won't be great. Your draw won't be fantastic, but control whatever you can. And that means controlling where you serve, controlling all those short forehands that you're running up to and working on. All those little 1%ers that will make a difference, help you win and help you get your confidence back.
And I guess, my next question was going to be about external pressures, but you've sort of answered that. And when you're doing your workouts, because I've always noticed you're very relaxed off the court. You don't seem too stressed, but I guess that all comes from the practice you're doing. And because when you're on tour, you're trying to make money. You need to support yourself. You probably want to fly your family over every now and again to watch and things like that. So you're away from your family. Were there other pressures? You got to support your coach.
My biggest pressures were, I think, the pressure of expectation. For some people, it comes from the public. For some players, it comes from families. For me, the expectation I put on myself was the most damaging part. And I think I made a mistake in my career, and I don't know why, but I always worried about what other people thought of me, how they thought I was playing, my level, and what comments were being made. And I wish I just disregarded all of that, and I never worried. But for some reason, I always tried to please everyone. And I think the most important thing when you are a professional athlete, particularly in tennis, is please yourself. Go out and play the way you want to play, the way that you feel satisfied. Play in the fashion that you've been working on the practice court, because then that's the way you build confidence. and forgetting about maybe results last year or 2 seasons ago. I mean, if you have gone through an injury and you have had a layoff, it's a fresh start. I always maintain that you need to disregard results from the past and just really look forward from this point onwards.
Yeah, that's great. In your game, you had a wonderful serve. Probably Serena's serving very well at the moment, but you'd be right up there with the best of the women on tour. Is there a way you practiced it, and how did you use your serve, to benefit the rest of your game? Now that you're off tour, you can probably give away a few of your secret plays. Like, I don't know if you used a kick serve out wide, serve volley, or on the ad side or on the juice side, pulling a girl wide and looking for your forehand to attack.
Yeah, well, for me, my favourite serve was, yes, the kick serve out wide on the ad court, because a lot of girls are weaker up above their shoulders. And for me, I could cheat. I could kick and almost start moving to my left, which is a little bit what I guess Sam Stosur does now. She kicks and she knows that the girls don't have the shoulder strength to pull that ball back cross court. Yeah. So then I basically built my serve around how I would receive a forehand.
Yep.
I never had a great backhand. Even when I was top 10 in the world, it was okay, it was average. Most girls on tour had a better backhand than me. So for me, my game was based around how I could get the quickest forehand. If a girl had a terrible forehand grip or a really extreme forehand grip, I would make a conscious effort of serving into that side, into her body, to really jam her up. So she'd mishit it, so then I could create myself a forehand. But I remember the times that I felt like I served the best, I'd stand up there and I'd think, I can ace on this serve.
Yeah.
And the next point I think, right, I can hit an ace on this serve. And I trusted my second serve as much as my first serve. So, there were many matches I went through and never served a double fault, because I just thought, if I miss my first, it doesn't matter. I still feel like I have a great second serve. And often the girls struggled more with my second serve in the end. But I think girls are better at moving laterally on the court. So sometimes I did purposely throw in kickers that were slightly shorter up in the court to make them jump out a little bit more. But when I served great, I felt like I could ace on every single serve.
Yeah, that's very interesting for pattern. We've watched even the top players. You see them serving, and that's what they do. They try to get a forehand. Federer and Nadal use their serve to set up the forehand. Even Andre Agassi didn't have a great serve. He was able to use it very well. One more question. What did you do pre-match? Did you have a routine that you did before every single match? And how did that play into making you feel relaxed on court? Or were there some days where you felt a bit sluggish and you had to mix it up and you had to have a cold shower or jump around a bit more?
Yeah, well, pre-match I always did have pretty much the same routine. Obviously, you go through your practice session. I always like to talk about tactics before I went for my warm-up, as in hitting warm-up. And the reason that I like, instead of warming up and then chatting about it before the match, because I used to find my mind would race a little bit right before the match, so that wasn't a good time to process information for me. So often I'd like to talk with my coach before my actual hit. Yep. And if my coach wasn't there, I would run through it myself the night before while I was having dinner or something, or even that morning. So then once I was hitting and warming up, subconsciously I could think about all the things that we'd spoken about and my opponent's weaknesses. I'd often like to practice an hour and a half before I actually play it. It's enough time to shower, rest, relax before. I would always do a 10-minute quick warm-up before the match. So I did have a few beads of sweat running off, because the worst thing for me was having a slow start. It's always difficult to recover. So, I wanted to hit the ground running as soon as, and it's intimidating for the opponent too when they see you jumping around and doing a few sprints, and sometimes you don't feel like it. Sometimes I'd purposely do it where they could see, so they knew I was ready, even though I wasn't necessarily in the mood for a warm-up. But there's a bit of cat and mouse in it too, but it did help me, particularly on my serve. And I've never had the best footwork, so I really did have to warm up well before my matches. And the most important thing for me too was hydration. I'd always have electrolytes. Gastrolytes are my favourite things, the effervescent tablets which you can get at the chemist, so I highly recommend you take some of those on the tour. And have one in the morning and one in the afternoon, just so you make sure.
Is that like a Barocca, or?
It's an effervescent tablet like a Barocca, but it's actually Sam uses them too. You just drop them in a bottle of water, and they provide all the essential electrolytes and sodium, potassium, without all the sweeteners. You know, the Gatorades and Powerades, they just have too much sugar. So a lot of the top players don't drink. You never see them drink Powerade. They have their own mixture of drinks. So particularly in Alice Springs, where it's really hot. I mean, that's a one-up you can get on your opponents, and just making sure always I had, if I went through a long match, that I had extra clothes, and yes, I had extra sweatbands, and yes, I had some fuel in there, like some energy food. I think particularly in Alice Springs when you're there, just make sure you...
All right. And are you a ice bath after the match, after a hot match?
Sometimes I did. I would often have a cold shower or where I could access an ice bath, yes, but it's always difficult. Sometimes you can find some bins, or just do hot and cold shower, but for me it was always important to stretch actively. So while I was still warm and sweating, that was the time to go for a jog and do a proper cool down, because if you do leave it 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you do cool down, and it's way less effective. But I think also the important part after playing a match, then you sort of have to time your cool down with fueling up too. So you're ready for your second round, or ready for the doubles in the afternoon as well. You don't want to miss that window where you can take in some energy.
Thanks a lot, Alicia. That was great.